once I figured out that there was this world, because I think a lot of parents don't even know that this world exists. Then when you go into it, you do see a lot of, well, if you follow my technique exactly, then that's, and I think that puts a lot of pressure on parents. And then the parents put the pressure on their kids. Whereas you went in and you individualize it for students. And I think that is the key. That's why you are so effective, because you work internally. And you're right, it's that foundation. If you don't have that, and there's no planning in the world that's going to work. And then the second piece of it was that you don't just say you have to do the planning the way exactly. You allow the tweaks and you celebrate it. So thank you for having me here. My name is Deepa Narasimhan, and my daughter had come to you for months, I think, for academic coaching. And that's why we're here. We're talking about her experiences and my experience as a parent with you.
Awesome. Okay, so let's go all the way back to when we first got in contact. So before even I worked with your daughter for those months, and even maybe before you found me and found School Without Suffering. So when you were looking for support, what did you want to achieve? Or you can think about it as, what problem were you facing?
So I would say the biggest issues we were having was the executive functioning for my daughter, staying on track, wanting to do her homework, and also, I guess there's many problems, but pulling me out as the person who was nagging her. So I wanted to pull myself out of that situation because I wasn't able to give her those self-regulation techniques, I suppose, to go ahead and do her work. So that's what I was looking for, someone to sort of fill a role like that. And I didn't even know if something like that existed. It was sort of a hope.
Yeah. And when you were hoping for that and thinking about it and really wanting to find it, what were you thinking it would mean for you, and what were you thinking that it would mean for your daughter if you were able to find that kind of support?
A lot of relief for all involved. I thought it would be, if we were at the time when we were just struggling, it was just finding this relief for her, where it was a safe place for her to be able to not only complete her assignments and live up to her potential, because she's brilliant, but do it in a place where she felt encouraged and wanted to actually do her work and not, fight it.
Yeah. Okay, so we found each other. You found me. We talked on the phone. We got her started. And we worked together for several months. So as I was working with your daughter, what did you notice? What kind of 2 to 3 specific things that I was doing with her, that she was doing, that she learned from our sessions? What 2 to 3 specific things did you notice had the biggest impact on her?
So the first was the tapping that you actually taught her, because that was an immediate calming exercise for her. And it was exactly what I was looking for, even though I didn't have the words for it, but I wanted some sort of self-regulation for her, some techniques that she would be open to learning, that she wasn't open to learning from me. So that was the first thing that I noticed, that she was calmer. And then the second thing that I noticed was the way she spoke to herself. You had taught her in the very first session on how to look at things, like not to look at what you haven't done, but what you have done, and to really sort of reprogram that inner voice. So it wasn't just this critical voice going through. So that was shocking, actually, after the first session, that she did those 2 things. Yeah, I don't know if I've ever told you that, but that was watching her do that. And then she taught me to do it.
Yeah.
And she would remind me, like, Mom, why don't you look at it this way? And then the third thing, and this is by the second or third session, was how she broke down her tasks on how to do things in a planner. And that was really nice, because wasn't the traditional way of breaking things down. It was something that really resonated with her. I have not been able to find that with anyone else.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. That's awesome. And that's exactly why I take the approach that I take, where it's not just, yes, I can teach, and I do teach all of my students that planning technique. And it is unique. Nobody else does it exactly how I do it, but every academic coach is going to have, a way to plan your time. But it's that piece foundationally that you were talking about with the EFT tapping and like self-talk, that without that piece, the time management plan is going to be more superficial, more of like a band-aid on top of the problem instead of really going in and fixing the root problem. And when you go in and fix the root problem, or at least offer solutions for the root problem, then the time management system is 1,000 times more effective.
Well, and that's exactly it. Like, you worked from the inside out, as opposed to, and you also did not dictate terms. And I think that that's something that's really important to understand across the board. Like, I know that there's a lot of academic coaches I looked into once I figured out that there was this world, because I think a lot of parents don't even know that this world exists.
Yeah.
Then when you go into it, you do see a lot of, well, if you follow my technique exactly, then that's, and I think that puts a lot of pressure on parents.
Yeah.
And then the parents put the pressure on their kids. Whereas you went in and you individualize it for students. And I think that is the key. That's why you are so effective, because you work internally. And you're right, it's that foundation. If you don't have that, and there's no planning in the world that's going to work. And then the second piece of it was that you don't just say you have to do the planning the way exactly. You allow the tweaks and you celebrate it. So, sorry, I didn't mean to overtake.
No, I so appreciate hearing all of this. This is like a huge reason
So
that
true.
it's so good to be doing these interviews and these conversations. Okay, so my next question for you is, what were the results of all of that? What did you see at home? How did it impact your daughter, and how did it impact just your household?
So the first was that I did notice that she would be much calmer when she was starting her homework, and when she was like doing assignments, and she had a better sense of what to expect, because you were helping keep her on track. Sorry, I can't speak. You were helping to keep her on track, but you weren't nagging her, and there was no shame. So she, in turn, was able to keep on track and feel good about herself. So you just sort of slipped into a part of her cycle, and you just spun it around. So she wasn't always doing I'm gonna set myself up for failure. You actually turned that wheel around. If that makes sense.
Great. Yeah, and that shame piece is such a huge part of it. Because
it's huge. And as a parent, like, I'm guilty of doing that, with her. And even though I know it's a horrible way to raise your kid, but you were able to do that. And I think that's key. So I did notice that she was more on top of her school. Having me out of it was also very, very helpful. Having you and her manage it together was incredibly helpful. And I don't know if we mentioned that we had first done the individual sessions, and then we moved to group. And I think that was actually really helpful. I think you can jump into group and it would be just fine. But for us, I really loved that she was able to build that relationship with you.
Yeah, yes. And that's exactly why that option exists. Some kids need, for wherever they're at in their journey, just need that one-on-one time to build the relationship, to get into their own new flow before doing it kind of in front of other people. But then when they're able to take it and do it in front of other people or in a group, then they see for themselves like, oh, I can do this. I can do this in class. I can do this with other kids. I can do this, in whatever environment I happen to be in. So good. I'm really glad to hear that too.
And she did teach your planning technique to my husband, and so
she did.
Who's the physician?
I love that.
So she's like, Dad, you got it all wrong. Let me just show you where you're going all wrong with your executive functioning. This is how you need to plan.
Oh my God.
And my husband afterwards is like, okay, she's got a point.
That's awesome. I love that.
I don't think I've ever shared this with you.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so this is all the stuff that was happening. So it was really good. She got a lot out of her time with you.
Oh, that's so awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so now I'm gonna ask back to before she started again. When you were making the decision of whether or not you were gonna enroll her in School Without Suffering, can you finish the sentence? I almost didn't join because.
I almost didn't join. That's hard. I can say before I talked to you, because once I talked to you, it was like, okay, this is where we need to be. So I should probably just preface that story with, we had spent a lot of money in a lot of places, and we were really down to we just couldn't spend anymore. So whatever we were going to spend it on, it had to work, which was, I know, ridiculous pressure. So I almost didn't join because I was afraid it was going to be like other programs.
Yeah.
We had been in. Yeah. And I'm so glad I talked to you. Because once I talked to you, and with your own educational background, it was like, okay, this is it, slam dunk. Then I didn't.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And it was so good to work with her. Okay, so next sentence that I'm going to ask you to finish is, my favorite part of my daughter working with your program is or was.
My favorite part of my daughter working with your program was watching her confidence grow.
That's my favorite part too. Okay, last question for you. Who would you recommend School Without Suffering to, and why?
So I would actually recommend it to all middle schoolers and high schoolers, even if they're doing well, because I think that kids, even adults, but kids especially, hit that wall of anxiety at some point. And if they have those techniques that you teach them early on, like from the foundation to the planning, I think that's going to help them succeed. You set them up on a road to success. So if parents could start earlier, I would recommend that. So to all kids, but especially kids who have a hard time with executive functioning.
That's awesome. All right, and those are all my questions for you for today. So is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
Run, don't walk. But honestly, it really does come from the heart. Like, you really did help my daughter quite a bit. So I cannot recommend your services enough. It is very different from the other programs that I ended up researching.